and welcome to our webinar on how to gain the additive advantage with new innovations for spine surgeries. I'm Carolyn Lowell with Bone Zone, and presenting today are four experts from 3D Systems. Ben Johnson, Vice President of Portfolio and Regulatory, Stefan Leonhardt, Director of Medical Devices, Jeff Rupert, Director of Application Innovation Group, and Zachary Wilczynski, Manager of Product Development. Combined, these four gentlemen have decades of experience in the development and commercialization of additive manufactured devices. And today you're going to hear how their work at 3D Systems is driving new innovations and applications to advance spine surgery. 3D Systems technologies and industry-leading expertise helps companies with their implants and instruments from concept to design to regulatory clearance and device manufacturing. Their 360-degree approach to additive manufacturing has enabled customers to accelerate innovation and personalize patient outcomes. Amazingly, their methodology has led to the manufacture of more than 2 million devices. And in the next hour, you're going to hear much more about that methodology and how it can help you. So thank you to 3D Systems for sponsoring our webinar. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ben Johnson, who will moderate our discussion.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about innovations in spine surgery. Welcome to the webinar. And as Carolyn had noted, we have a wonderful panel group. They're going to talk about different aspects in spine innovations. First, Jeff is going to talk to us about advancing and accelerating innovation using direct metal printing and the new enhancements that we've made to equipment to improve productivity. And he's also going to talk about the application innovation group and how we partner with our customers to accelerate their innovations. Then Stefan is going to walk us through new technologies and the innovations that his group have built for high performance polymer printing. And then finally, Zach is going to talk to us about the future of personalization in spine. And prior to doing so, I'd like to just introduce the group. 3D Systems is the leaders in additive manufacturing with over 30 years of history and experience in healthcare and bringing healthcare and innovative solutions to the market. Built upon our foundational IP, our certified quality management systems, and our best in the business workforce talent, we've been lucky enough to participate in over 150,000 personalized and individual patient cases, over 2 million implants into the market, and are fortunate enough to work with industry leaders and experts in helping to deliver innovations to the market that enhance patient care. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff to lead us through new advancements in metal printing. Jeff?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'm Jeff. So one of the really exciting things that we've done recently at 3D Systems is build upon our legacy equipment. So our Flex 350, which is kind of a workhorse within the orthopedic industry. What we've done here, we've added a second laser. Seems simple enough. There's quite a bit to it. Really, as we look at where the industry is going, we've seen a lot of growth in industries that are lower volume, higher mix. So spine is really one of the places where you see an immediate performance improvement because of the osseo integration, the osteoblast adherence to titanium, and the ability to build monolithic porous structures. But one of the things that, as we look into new markets, and one of the where that goes is how do we do this with better production time and better productivity. So by adding a second laser, we're able to decrease the build time by up to 50%, even more in some cases. What this means, those that are already using additive probably know this, but a lot of the cost of the part is actually inherently built into the machine time, the time that you're on the printer. It's a relatively large piece of capital equipment, and it's a phase change. It's a foundry process, essentially. So that faster throughput reduces the overall cost very significantly. Now, as we've looked to increase productivity, we didn't want to have any negative effect on the overall quality of the product. So we built it really upon the same chassis as our single laser system. So what that's really built upon is our unique vacuum chamber concept. So rather than using a displacement method or a vacuum on just the build chamber, We pulled vacuum on the powder feeds and the build and the entire build chamber itself. What this allows us to do is operate at a O2 level of less than 30 ppm, typically actually between 0 and 5, and also condition that powder at the beginning. And this is very important as we look at the overall total cost of ownership. The powder reuse and the ability to reuse powder while it's still having a negative effect on the final fit, form, and function of the device is incredibly important. Other laser systems are using a displacement method. We're up at like over 600 ppm. And things like EBM, although operating in a vacuum, operate under between 750 and 950 C, where we're picking up a very significant amount of oxygen content every build, leading to expensive and complicated powder reuses. We use a simple top-up methodology and can get to at least 125 powder reuses without going out of ELI, extra low interstitial specification. So again, this is our workhorse printer. It's built on the same architecture as our existing machine, which over 2 million medical devices, implants have been produced on at 3D Systems, not to mention the ones outside that are at contract manufacturers or OEMs. Really hot, and we still maintain that best-in-class surface finish. As we look at the other key advantages, where we've looked at this is primary large joint and then larger spinal implants. NASA's next week, and we kind of all know this, it almost is an additive manufacturing show. It's been a place where you really get that performance improvement out of additive. And you also, because of the lack of tooling, it's very cost advantageous as well. As we look to other applications like acetabular, the total hip space or total knee space, what we've looked at here is just building kind of a dummy model, 54 millimeter cup, and a sort of a medium-sized tib tray with a keel and pin. What we've seen here is that we can improve the build time even on layer thickness 60, which is kind of what's used currently, by almost 50%. But as we go into even a higher layer thickness, like 90 micron, we get a very nice surface finish still, and actually can build lattices at 90 microns and see an improvement of over 60% build time reduction. So what this means is what would typically take us 24 hours, we could potentially get up to 3 builds over one build a shift, rather than having one build over 3 shifts. As we look at the entire value chain, DMP, the actual manufacturing, additive manufacturing, is a relatively small piece of the pie, but that cost is significant. So we're seeing up to 23% improvement in cost across that entire value chain by adding that second laser. So we're now competitive with castings, forgings with better yields, better lead times than porous plasma spray, and better clinical data around what that monolithic lattice structure can achieve. Now, how do we implement this? And this is really, I think this is really what sets 3D Systems apart. We have a very comprehensive and flexible approach. We really, within the application innovation group that I lead, and 3D Systems as a whole, we believe that there is no prefix menu. The right solution comes at the right time, both as our customer is growing in their additive journey, as well as the application is moving through, say, a design control process, but also moving through just the general maturity of the application itself. And typically what that looks like is we're working hand in hand with the customer to explore. So strategically consulting to identify that need. Can we consolidate parts? How do we improve performance? In orthopedic, it's pretty obvious, but there's less obvious places. So building an acetabular shell that's much thinner than what we can do with porous plasma in a forging, so that we can get, say, a bigger cup or a bigger joint in there, which is where the industry is going. How can we comprehensively build, say, a monolithic expandable spine cage, and really jointly innovate to get that? So really pulling from all the different tools within our toolbox, both additive and subtractive, and then work through a development approach. We've done this a lot. So we mirror our customers' design control process, or even work within our own customers' design controls to characterize and develop the application itself, working within our pre-existing validation so that we don't have to do quite as much, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But then validation. This can mean both validating the application or the device itself, so the V&V approach for the device itself and the various mechanical cadaveric testings that's required to get there, but also implementing the validation, process controls, risk management, so that our customers can do it themselves, whether at an OEM level or contract manufacturing level. We also offer production services, both at pilot rate as well as volume. Again, it's really the right solution at the right time, but we can get you off the ground, and we can get you off the ground faster. And we can do this in an approach where we can scale both at our sites, at contract manufacturer sites, and at OEM sites. So you almost have a built-in dual source manufacturing model from the development cycle. And we're developing this business in a specialized manner. We talk the talk, we walk the walk as well. We are doing this on a day-to-day level to understand, and we're solving the same problems that our customers are. We're speaking the same language, and we're really uniquely positioned to be able to do that within our 1345 QSR sites. So as we look at the overall validation approach, there's a lot that comes with this. And I'm a bit of a homer when it comes to validation, but one could make the argument that we built a lot of our business on best-in-class validation and really, really deeply understanding and characterizing our process. So as we look at the overall approach, it's a three-pronged approach: process, equipment, and product. Typically, we suggest, and we also do it ourselves, we go very, very robust and deep on the process side. By truly understanding our process and validating the process, we can throw a lot more applications down it at limited risk and ultimately speed path to market and improve ROI. So what this looks like is it's really a risk-based approach. So understanding what the overall process is and what that validation plan looks like, and then risk analysis. Get those process controls implemented and as low ALAPT, as low as possible, those risk factors, and then build engineering studies to understand what our high-low limits are. So what our critical process parameters are compared to our critical to quality outcomes, understand what those look like, and then ultimately build a series of engineering studies that help us understand what those limits are, ultimately culminating in a full factorial design of experiments. What the full factorial design of experiments allows us to do is really understand what our first and second level interactions are, so that we can build out an operational qualification or an OQ that really is in worst case AM conditions. Then it moves to a PQ, typical PQ, series of shutdowns and startups over a number of shifts through the analysis of data. We also have software validation as part of this. There's been a lot of new guidance recently around the software validation side. This is not software as a medical device, but in this case, there's the CAD/CAM software. So the slice, hatch, lattice design software that needs to be validated, and then the firmware of the machine. On an equipment level, if it was one machine, then we're already done. But the second, third, fourth, fifth, 60th machines, what we're typically doing on an equipment qualification level is really understanding the configuration management, making sure that our machines are all configured in the same way, moving through an IOQ, same as what we would have done on the process side, but for every machine, and then a performance qualification, which is essentially a machine matching study to make sure from an input and output standpoint that we have consistent, repeatable, reliable outcomes. And then on a product level, what this allows us to get to is a really limited product verification validation, where we're able to really qualify the fit, form, and function, the measurement system analysis, the test method validations, et cetera, to get that product to market, but not have to rely on our process validation, rather having then to integrate our process and product as one, again, allowing for scalability. And then as we look to production and launch, we support both from a regulatory perspective, everything from having full design control to supporting as a part of the design control process. So we have a process called quality by design, which is our application, our product development lifecycle, as well as master files at FDA for titanium, both on single and dual laser, that allow us to really assuage some of those concerns that the FDA is going to have. It's built up to meet the considerations of the industry. Again, allowing faster speed to market. We target typically 6 months for a 510K for new products. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. A couple of questions for you, and I'm going to step back to a slide you presented earlier on our dual laser system. And a question for me is, what are the considerations that we have when we think about developing a printer with additional laser capability on it?
So as we looked at the development of this system, what we wanted to do is, there's the actual optics chain is identical to single laser. And what this allows us to do is have the same parameter sets that we use in single laser. So it's kind of a one-to-one capability improvement. As we look at the risk of the process and what validation looks like between single and dual laser, things like gas flow and heat exchange become super important. So, that actually ties both to the software and the process itself. So from a software standpoint, how do we make sure that our lasers are not getting in each other's way? As well as making sure that the plume, the condensate, the smoke, the soot that's coming off of the build is extracted without getting in the way of the next laser. So the things that we looked at as we went from single to dual is gas flow and then laser interaction. But because it's the same exact optics, the same file from single to dual can be used. So this is especially important as we look at our existing base, right, that has a lot of machines already. We want to have the flexibility to say this same file that we've qualified can be used on a single or a dual across the entire fleet. And that's really unique. So from a validation perspective, it's got to be same.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to now introduce Stefan to talk about the next hottest thing in implant manufacturing with some technology that his group has developed as part of the Kumovis team that was recently acquired by 3D Systems. Stefan?
Thanks for the introduction, and I'm looking forward to speak about our Kumovis R1 3D printing technology in the next couple of minutes. The R1 is the first printer on the market dedicated to high-performance polymers, fully targeting medical device manufacturing. So you can see here on the right side, the printer, the hardware itself. The base technology is material extrusion, meaning we're working with filaments as raw material, which is the advantage of an easy material handling, as we don't have to deal with powder, and also makes, of course, or has a high influence on the post-processing side. The machine itself is, as I said, 100% dedicated to medical, meaning we only are using components which come in contact with the filament, the molten polymer, or the final device that are out of biocompatible materials. So we were really focusing on that from the beginning on, so actually during the design phase of the machine itself. It's a very compact machine and highly scalable. So the footprint is ballpark 1 square meter or 9 square feet, and we only need a high voltage power supply and pressurized air to set up the machine, and are able within 1 day, 2 days actually run the system up and produce first parts. So this makes the system highly scalable and also very attractive. It can be set up at the point of care, meaning we can set up this system in a clinical environment. The print size itself is about ballpark 200 diameter and 150 millimeters in height, and we ensure a reproducible printing within the full build chamber. And even more important, we ensure for the first time that we are achieving mechanical properties of parts that are suitable or comparable to injection molding or machine parts, especially using high performance polymers like PEEK, PAC, or Radel. And how we achieve this is kind of our core IP. So we developed over the last year a special temperature control technology inside our build chamber. So you see it on the left side in the simulation. So we have a laminar airstream which is flowing through our build chamber around the part from the top to the down, and we can heat up this air to 250 degrees Celsius. So this is how we ensure that we're always printing above the glass transition point of the high performance polymers, enabling a really good layer bonding between each layer. And this is kind of the key technology of the machine that enables the good mechanical properties. And over the last year, there was, especially for semi-crystalline polymers like PEEK, always the drawback that in the worst case orientation of the part, meaning in the set direction, we were seeing bad layer bonding and were not be able to achieve mechanical properties that fulfill standards, which we have to fulfill in the medical area, like the ASTM F2026 for PEEK And we can see here on the right side a stress strain diagram of peak tensile bars printed in all three orientations. And you can see even in the worst case setup, the ZX orientation, we are reaching the minimum requirements, meaning minimum elongation at break 5% and minimum tensile strength of 90 megapascal. So with setting up the right process parameters, we can for the first time now ensure that we are hitting this mechanical requirements, which is crucial to really use this technology for medical devices. Of course, it's not only doable with PEEK. So that's another great advantage of this technology. We have a pretty broad material portfolio. We have different materials for permanent implants, which we can see on the top side. I spoke already about PEEK. However, in the future, we're also seeing a shift towards modification of PEEK grades. One grade, for example, which we also showcase next week on NAS is Evonik's PEEK Fusion. That is an implantable grade PEEK dedicated to an improved osseointegration. So we have a biphasic calcium phosphate enhanced PEEK in this case. And already we're able together with Evonik to show in vitro tests that we're really comparable now to better or more osseointegrative materials like titanium with this material. Also, a very attractive material is fiber reinforced PEEK. There will also be soon an implantable grade available. We see this more for stiff products like plates, cervical plates, for example, in the spine area. We will also show a few parts here next week at NAS. Besides PEEK, we also can work with PEC. PEC is a little bit more ductile than PEEK, also available as an implantable grade. Besides this high performance polymers, we can also work with the same technology with resorbable polymers. So here we are in a different temperature range, but also our system or our technology is very attractive for resorbable polymers, where we have the issue to control the energy input in the part, that it's not leading to degradation already during the processing. Here we are mostly working with PDO, PLGA, PCL, or PLLA. So these are 4 different resorbable grades. Each have different mechanical properties and different resorbing times. On the instrument side, so for non-implantable devices, we can use radial, PPSU. Also here we have different modifications of the base material. So for example, we have an XRO grade, which is filled with barium sulfate, which makes it seeable or visible in X-ray technology, for example. Also, we can have it in different colors. So we will have at NAS next week 5 different colors: blue, green, gray, red, and yellow. And we'll showcase trial spacers out of this material. Another advantage of this material is that it's sterilizable up to 500 times. So we can print reusable instruments with this material. And again, all these materials are processable with the same setup and the same machine. On the next few slides, I want to present a few devices we're actually working on and we'll also showcase next week at NAS. So on this case, on this slide, we can see a spinal cage printed out of the Evonik PEEK Fusion, so the BCP enhanced material. And also additionally, it has an infill out of resorbable polymer. So this is something we are currently working on together with Evonik, and we'll showcase at NAS more mechanical properties on this material and also first results from an ASTM test on these final devices. I was already mentioning radial. So this is a very attractive material for instruments. On this slide here, we can see spinal fusion trial spacers available in different colors for different sizes, lodoses, so color coding is possible with this material. Printing time of one of these devices is ballpark 30 minutes. And we're also developing full processes for the post-processing, meaning how we get a smooth, shiny surface on these devices. Of course, also we are, during the development of the process, showcasing the capacities on the mechanical properties after sterilization up to 500 cycles for these materials. So as I said, this is a highly attractive material for reusable, hot steam sterilizable instruments. Again, what I want to mention on this slide is it's filled with barium sulfate, so you really can see this device on X-ray technology, which is pretty unique in the market so far. And the last device I want to speak about is bone plates. So here we are using fiber reinforced PEEK materials. very interesting with our technology is by toolpath generation, we can kind of align the fibers in a specific direction, meaning we can optimize the toolpath generation for the load, which is in the end applied to the final implant. So we can, we will use these applications for trauma, for example, but also in the spine area for cervical plates. Printing time of such a device is 30 to 60 minutes. Again, we developed a post-processing technology to achieve a smooth and shiny surface for these devices. And of course, also strategies how to set up support structures and how to print these devices in a most productive way. So all these three applications will be showcased next week at NAS. And yeah, if there are more questions on these devices or the technology itself, happy to answer them now.
Thanks, Stefan. So one question that I have for you, and I'll step back to the PEEK application, is PEEK materials are expensive.
True.
And I'm curious on your thoughts on how does 3D printing of these types of constructs and parts help reduce the part cost over traditional manufacturing processes?
Of course, we can reduce the material waste by far. So this is one of the main cost drivers in this application. So we are finally printing these devices without much waste. So we can minimize with our technologies the support structures. And of course, another topic is less interaction with the machine itself. So especially in the spine area, we are developing automated systems, how we print one cage next to the other and use, for example, our print head to kick them off the build plate. So you can let the system run for several hours and just in the end collect the cages.
And another question I would have then is, with the support structures that you mentioned, what are the typical post-processing steps that are required for these types of parts off of this machine?
So it's a little bit depending on the application, of course. So for trial, for spinal implants like this one, we're normally using a blasting post-processing. You can automate this in rotating baskets, for example. It takes then up to 15 minutes a cycle, and you can load the cycle with, I would say, ballpark 50, 60 implants. So this is also highly automated. On the other side, if we have the trial spacers, we want to achieve a shiny, smooth surface. Here we are using tumbling technology. So also here we developed over the last years the right process, the right setup with the right media to achieve a really shiny and smooth surface.
Perfect. Well, very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming out of this technology and the development of the technology. Reminder to the attendees, if you have questions for any of the panelists, please feel free to type your question into the Q&A section of the Zoom meeting, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the session. With that, I'd like to now turn it over to Zach Wilczynski, who's going to talk to us about personalization in the spine space and how we can deploy personalization for instruments and implants. Zach?
Thanks, Ben. To start with, I just want to walk through the digital workflow that's associated with the personalization or patient-specific medical devices. And 3D Systems has over 2 decades of VSP or virtual surgical planning experience. And no matter what application we're working on, whether that's a craniomaxillofacial application or a spine application, we've got a pretty standard workflow that we go through in order to create personalized medical devices. So to start with, we need patient data, and depending on the application, the surgery that we're trying to simulate, and what the end medical devices, this can vary from X-ray data to CT data to MR data, and all of that depends upon the specific application and medical device that we're working on. But once we've received the patient data, we can then use image segmentation software to create 3D models, which will then be used for virtual surgical planning. And our team in Denver, Colorado, we have a number of biomedical engineers that are focused on virtual surgical planning. And we have workflows that incorporate surgeon input, whether that's through a live web call or whether that is just our biomedical engineers using their expertise to create a virtual surgical plan and then receive surgeon approval on those cases. But those biomedical engineers are working on the same types of cases every day, and they're building a really in-depth knowledge base for the specific application that they're working on. And they're generally working with surgeons all over the world. So they're up to date with the standard of care and innovative surgical techniques so that we can provide the best experience for the surgeon users. Once we have a patient-specific case that has been planned and approved by a surgeon, we move on to design. And whether that's a patient-specific anatomic model or a patient-specific implant, we go through the same design software, and we use Geomagic Freeform, which is a software that allows you to kind of model organic shapes that are incredibly important for patient-specific applications. Once we have the final anatomic model, surgical guide, or implant, we then move on to manufacturing. And of course, using additive manufacturing, we have several different technologies and material choices available depending upon the specific application, as well as some post-processing and machining capabilities as well as necessary. With personalized medical devices, inspection becomes incredibly critical because your lot size can be thought of as N of 1. So we go through generally 100% verification on all the patient-specific parts that we're going through, as well as fit checks and interfacing with standard components to make sure that this patient-specific device is going to behave as intended. From there, we're delivering directly to the sales representative or the surgeons, generally for patient-specific cases. And all of this happens on a very quick timeline because from the day we receive the patient data, there can be changes in the patient anatomy. So we want to ensure that we're delivering products as quickly as needed for these patient-specific devices. Next, I've got 4 slides that outline different applications of personalized medicine within the spine field. The first one I want to talk about today because it has the lowest threshold or barrier of entry, and that's anatomic modeling. Some of the reported benefits that we've seen in literature and through products on the market are increased visualization of the patient anatomy. So in the 2 different images we have here, we've got on the right, a spine model laid out perfectly on the patient's back. It helps the surgeon visualize where the anatomy is currently at, what vessels need to be worked around, and what the surgical approach is. And then in the bottom image from literature, we have actually a tumor model. We see the red or pink highlighting of the tumor model so that the surgeon can actually have something generally within the operating suite that helps them understand where they're at and what the surgical approach is in real time. Additionally, a reported benefit would be reduced intraoperative time and reduced blood loss. So with these anatomic models, the surgeon is able to spend time before ever entering the operating suite and really hone the surgical approach and reduce the amount of time that the patient needs to be on the operating table. And then the final reported benefit for anatomic modeling is patient education and patient compliance. So one of the factors that's always a topic within modern healthcare is helping the patient understand the surgical procedure that they're going to receive and how they can follow through after surgery and have the best outcome possible. So a lot of times these surgeries are really scary for patients, and being a surgeon with an anatomic model, they can show what the surgery looks like, what bones they're going to be working with, and really providing satisfaction for that patient and help put them at ease before ever going into surgery. The next application that we have are patient-specific or personalized rods and rod bending templates. This is one step beyond anatomic modeling, where you can have a template that helps you bend in the operating room a rod to the specific shape, or actually the actual manufacturer for patient-specific rods. Some of the reported benefits here are reduced intraoperative time. Once again, if you have a template based on a patient-specific surgical plan before you ever go into operating suite, you can pre-bend all of your rods and really reduce the time that the patient's under. You can reduce rod breakage. So as you have a template, you can really fine-tune the movements that need to happen with that rod in order to create the patient outcome that you want. And then improved deformity correction with a pre-surgical plan based on patient medical data. You can get the exact result that you want because you have a template that you can compare to. You have measurements that can be taken. In this bottom image, this was from a pretty recent article. It shows a number of different rods that a surgeon bent trying to match a template without actually having the template. And we see the variety of different rod shapes that were provided, and then there's one rod missing, and that was actually rod breakage as well. So this article really spoke well to some of the benefits of patient-specific rods and patient-specific rod bending templates. So this is one step beyond anatomic modeling, and the next application is patient-specific surgical guides. So the main application here in spine that we've seen with a number of products on the market are pedicle screw guides. So the pre-surgical planning or virtual surgical planning of where the pedicle screw needs to be and what the final deformity correction is going to be. Generally single-use guides that are shipped non-sterile to a surgeon. They're then sterilized at the point of care and used for a single surgery. After use during that surgery, they'll then be disposed of. But these often come with a case report that will outline the number of screws, the diameter and length of screws as well. With all that being said, the reported benefits here are reduced intraoperative time, decreased radiation exposure, and improved deformity correction. So with decreased radiation exposure, instead of needing to constantly put the patient under fluoroscopy or under a C-arm and checking where the drill is at and what size screw you want to use, all of this will be done beforehand with a CT data. And that really helps increase the deformity correction as well, because you have a higher rate of selecting the correct length and diameter of screw so that you're creating the most robust patient outcome possible. And then the first one I mentioned was intraoperative time. So once again, spending time before ever going into the surgery, the surgeon can plan everything out and then spend less time in surgery. The final application that I wanted to discuss today, and the most impactful and most relevant today, is patient-specific interbody cages. So we've got some reported benefits, and to me, this is the best solution for complex deformity correction. Not every company provides a full range of base plates or implants that are going to account for every case. So when we receive CT data and then we can design the correction to a specific patient that provides the highest outcome possible. Some papers have also discussed improved biomechanics and reduced stresses, which on the right we have a graph from one of these articles that shows on the top we have the non-conforming or standard base plate, on the bottom we have a patient-specific or conforming end plate. And within these, we can see a variety of decreases in stress from the top to the bottom. And then it's intra and like within the level that you're correcting versus the levels around it would be the purple versus orange. So we see a lot of improvement with the conforming or patient-specific end plate. And all of this speaks to some of that improved deformity correction as well. So this is the highest barrier of entry of patient-specific spine applications. But I think this is where there's the most room for growth within the space today. These are just 4 examples of patient-specific applications in spine. There are some others, but we'll continue to see growth within the space.
Thanks, Zach. One question for you. Personalization, as we know, of medical devices and personalization of procedures always comes at a cost. How should we think about the value proposition for personalization in spine surgeries? You talked about a couple key factors for clinical outcomes. What other value props do you see in this space?
Yeah, I think there are two main value propositions that are important for patient specific, and I touched on them a little bit, but the number one factor for me, or value proposition for me, is intraoperative time. So intraoperative time is the largest cost driver in surgery. So the time that the patient is under and surgery is actually taking place is the number one cost driver. So any time that can be moved from intraoperative to preoperative, where it's just a surgeon or engineers working on a pre-surgical plan and producing patient-specific medical devices, that's going to provide a lot of cost savings in OR time. And there have been some papers within spine and even within other orthopedic applications that have shown just that reduction in intraoperative time can cover the increased cost associated with patient-specific medical devices. The other area that I would focus is improved patient outcomes, specifically in complex deformity cases. A lot of the literature that's starting to come out, academic literature, is pointing to patient-specific interbodies or spine fusion devices providing a lot better biomechanic results than a standard implant can, just with end plate coverage or vertebral body coverage within the joint space. So I think there's a lot of room for patient-specific implants, and I think that's where we're going to see the most growth coming forward.
What existing hurdles do you see in this space that's right now headwinds for further adoption of personalization in spine?
Yeah, similar to the question we just talked about, there's cost or additional steps required to produce a patient-specific device. The number one hurdle that I see is reimbursement. So standard of care today for a spinal fusion case may not require medical imaging or any anatomic modeling. And a lot of times it's difficult to understand who's responsible for the cost of the medical imaging. So I think there needs to be some improvements or pathways for reimbursement of the steps associated with patient-specific devices and justifying those based on reduced intraoperative times or specifically patient outcomes. Additionally, I think we're at the cusp of personalization in implants, but there's a lack of clinical data right now. So we're at the turnover point from academic literature to clinical data. So it feels we're right at that turning point today.
Yeah, got it. Perfect. Thanks so much. With that, that ends our presentation portion of this webinar. I'll ask that the panelists turn on their cameras, and we have a number of questions from the audience. And the first question I'll turn back over to you, Zach. For a typical personalized workflow, what is the turnaround time? And I know it's dependent on applications, but maybe if you could talk about, three of the major applications that you presented, what would be the typical turnaround time for the digital workflow and then the manufacturing?
Yeah, so the applications that I went through were somewhat purposefully in that order. So increasing levels of complexity and therefore increasing levels of turnaround time. It may not be as extreme as a lot of people think, but starting with anatomic modeling, the digital workflow is quickest for that, as there's generally not a virtual surgical plan, but we can turn around anatomic models within generally a week, depending on what the workflow looks like, how many levels of the spine need to be segmented, and the print application that your anatomic model requires, whether that's color or sterilization or fitting different parts to. So we can be as low as a week on that end. And then patient-specific guides for other orthopedic applications, we're generally delivering from receipt of CT data to the sales rep is generally 2 to 4 weeks. And then in the new realm of patient-specific implants, we're working on that. In other orthopedic applications, we generally provide patient-specific implants in that 4 to 7 week range. So well within the scheduling timelines of most of these cases, and we're really flexible depending on the application as well.
Got it. A question for you, Stefan, on the PPSU material, radel-like material that you discussed. How is cleaning of those instruments typically done?
So we make sure that we create a surface during the post-processing steps that really hospital setups can be used. So standard setups, how to clean instruments in the hospital. Mostly using some detergents, some automated cleaning processes, and then hot steam sterilization. And it's in most of the times a question on the surface, of course.
Yeah, and then you had mentioned that the parts can be sterilized 500 cycles.
Exactly.
Have we tested beyond 500 cycles, or what happens at 500 cycles?
It's not breaking at the 501st cycle. It's more that until this cycles we did the testing. We focused on mechanical properties, impact, and strength, of course. There are studies which are showing more cycles, so it's possible. It's just like this what we currently aim for testing, but we're completely open if that is a requirement to do so.
Perfect. And then I think we have time for one more question. And Jeff, this one's for you. But clearly titanium printing has been a major success in orthopedics, including spine. And a reason for that is because we're able to meet industry standards in terms of mechanical and chemical properties of the parts that are printed. Curious to your thoughts and view on the future of those standards and the development of standards. Today, we typically try to match standards for wrought materials or traditionally manufactured materials. What's the future of standards in titanium printing?
So yeah, I mean, when we first started doing this, I mean, the first device that I did a 510K on was back in 2010. Back then, you know, we referenced F1108. I think it was actually a casting standard from back in the day. Since then, ASTM has released two material standards, one for typical grade 5 material and then one for the extra low interstitial material. I think where the industry is going, though, material standards are enough for some things, but maybe not enough for everything. And they need also be updated, both from a heat treatment standpoint as well as an overall processing standpoint. So through F42, which is the ASTM group working in additive manufacturing in conjunction with the F4, the medical device group, we're actually updating the F3001 standard to be more in line with the sort of industry specifications now. What we found is actually additive is so robust that we're way above like a wrought standard. And the regulators, FDA specifically, has recognized this and has been asking to see some changes. So I think that's part of it, is really driving the standards world in a way that can help grow the utilization of additive within the orthopedic industry in general. And then there's some other places where we can help as well. And I think that's, around validation. So standard practices for how to validate medical devices used in additive manufacturing. There's one that it was on ballot, or will have to go on ballot again. It'll hopefully be released by the end of the year, that I may or may not have wrote part of with a few people. But that really it's a standard practice for how to validate. And the way we look at it at 3D Systems is, we're really looking at growing the entire pie. How do we, there's no malicious bad intent out there, but there's a lot of differing levels of sophistication when it comes to this stuff. And if we can be leading from the front and sort of growing the industry so that we are burning down risk down to as lowest possible rates and offering those best practices, this is generally better for everybody, so that our OEM partners and our clinical partners can do what they need to do to innovate and deliver better clinical outcomes.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. With that concludes this portion of our webinar. I'd like to turn it back over to Carolyn for a few closing remarks. Carolyn?
Thank you so much. You covered a lot of territory and it was a great presentation. So again, thank you to Ben, Stefan, Jeff, and Zach for your time today. And thank you to our audience for all of the great questions that you submitted. You can learn more about 3D Systems at 3dsystems.com. And there will be an on-demand version of this webinar posted to bonezonepub.com should you want to access it again. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And have a great one. Thank you.